Well, we just heard the verdict in that case. Daisy Link guilty of second-degree murder. They are polling the jury right now just to make sure that that's the verdict that everyone has come to. It has to be unanimous. Why don't we go ahead and welcome our guest for this hour to discuss what we have been seeing so far. Gabriel Sepulveda-Sanchez. Gabriel, thank you so much for being with us. No real reaction from the defendant, Daisy Link, in this case. It did not take jurors very long to reach the verdict. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I don't see a reaction to, I think a defendant expects that. And I think with a quick verdict like that, I mean, I think these jurors had their mind made up. I think in order to prove self-defense, you really have to show that your life was in imminent danger and the actions you took were an immediate need to protect your life. And I just don't think they saw that here. There was too many prior incidences, too much evidence that he was concerned for his well-being before he was killed. Too much history of violence, too much of a history of violence that she's instigated. And I think the jury saw that and they made their decision quick. There wasn't enough evidence, I thought, for self-defense here. But that's whenever you have a quick verdict like that, it sounds like they have made their mind up a while ago.
And it's interesting because I felt like it was only about 10 minutes before the verdict, but I don't know, Kelly, it may have been more than that. The jury wanted to see some pictures, and they wanted to specifically see a picture of a back door, perhaps autopsy pictures that were in a demonstrative aid used by the prosecution, but had not been admitted. So the judge with the attorneys got all those admitted, sent them back, and then they came out with this decision. So I wonder, does that mean perhaps there was one that was on the fence and they said, let's look at pictures. They looked at those pictures, and then, Gabriel, shortly after that, we get the verdict.
Yeah. Well, definitely. I think what I learned with my jury trials is that jurors like to see, there's people that are different visual learners. People like seeing pictures, videos, and I think the same thing. I think there was one person that wanted to ask that question, hey, I'd like to see the photos of this, and they gave it to them. And so jurors sometimes they want that. A lot of jurors, not a lot of times, they want the actual see photos. They want to see video evidence. Maybe a couple people weren't sure, and then that was what turned them over to flip them real quick. So that sounds like that could have been the case also. But it's not uncommon at all for jurors to ask the judge or foreman to go ahead and we need a little bit more evidence. Can you get us those pictures? Let's look at this again. And sometimes those are the things that just flip those couple jurors that might be on the fence about the case.
You know, one of the things that was something that I thought prosecutors would have a hard time with in this case is that the victim, and I'll ask you about that in a second, but they went back on the record there in court in Miami. Let's go back and hear what they're having to say.
It would otherwise be held as PSI. I don't know if the defense is waiving that or not, but if we already have a sentencing, other than the waiving of PSI, it would need to be for.
Do you want me to order a pre-sentence investigation?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so we'll order a pre-sentence investigation. They usually take about 8 weeks, so we'll just reset this for about 8 weeks time. It's going to print tomorrow anyway, Mr. Tomas, because we're after a cutoff date for the clerk of court. 8 weeks from now puts us roughly around Thanksgiving. So I'll just ask for the pre-sentence investigation to come back the Friday before Thanksgiving, the 21st. Is that all right?
That's fine. I can make myself available.
That's just for the return of the PSI. It's not for actual sentencing itself.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so 21st is the next court date for the return of the pre-sentence investigation. If it's back then, we can pick a day for sentencing after we get the pre-sentence investigation. Is there anything that I need to address from the parties before we adjourn for the day?
I don't believe so.
All right. All right. Thank you all. We're adjourned. I can sign it tomorrow.
Gabriel, so one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about is the victim in this case, Pedro Jimenez. They talked about him being high on cocaine, having a large amount of cocaine in his system, also having alcohol in his system, as well as, I believe, marijuana. So from a prosecutorial standpoint, having a victim like that, that's not exactly easy. So it made me wonder, okay, maybe prosecutors aren't going to have that easy of a time with this case. What do you think about that? But clearly they did come back in quite a short time with the guilty verdict.
No, I agree with you. I think that's anytime you got a victim that's under the influence of cocaine and alcohol, marijuana, that's not good. Because obviously their behavior, that shows right there that their behavior, they're not going to make good decisions, or it's, there's an impairment in how they normally behave. So I think that's a legitimate concern. However, doesn't necessarily mean this guy was, attacking her, or that he was a threat to her life. But the defense attorney, he did his job pointing that out, and that's any good defense lawyer is going to really amplify that too. So yeah, the prosecutor, that could have went bad for him. That's definitely not a good fact in their favor. But ultimately, the jury decided, that there was just more evidence of motive and intent to kill this person.
And you can see her getting upset. I noticed it looked like she was starting to get upset when the judge was talking about the pre-sentencing report being due on November 21st, and then a court date will be scheduled for the sentencing. And she is upset there. It looks like she is beginning to tear up, perhaps cry, the emotion, the reality setting in. Just tell us quickly, Gabriel, what is it like when you're sitting next to a defendant and waiting, or any client really, waiting for that decision to come in and the emotion of it?
It's tough. It's tough for the lawyers. It's tough for the client. Whether you're on the good end of a result or a result that doesn't go your way, it's not. It's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of, you get those pits in your stomach, like, man, I hope they get it right. And you just don't really know. That case, the more I've done jury trials, you realize that it really is a jury's case. You can be a good lawyer and you can put your story out there and put your evidence on, but ultimately it's about how that jury feels about your client, feels about the evidence. So it's really out of your hands, and you really just try to sit there and just hope it goes your way. And it's not a good feeling, if you have a client that's got I'm a civil jury trial lawyer. We do a lot of wrongful death cases, and got some good results, got in cases where we didn't go our way. So either way, that feeling of fear is there. Then you realize that it's really just out of your hands. And I know criminal defense lawyers have a really tough job. They're the client's lives on the line, and they do what they can, and with the facts they have. So it's definitely not being a trial lawyer is not for the faint of heart. I know that.
No, it's not. I think we can all say from our own experiences that it's a lot. Now, Michael Ayala and I have been texting about this case, even though he's not here. He's here in spirit, because he made a really good point, Kelly. I just have to mention, after the verdict, they didn't put her in handcuffs. Typically, you see the defendant almost immediately getting remanded into custody. They come, they put on the handcuffs. That didn't happen in the whole time we were watching.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw her get emotional, though, as you mentioned. So, who I really feel bad for is her little boy. He took the stand via Zoom. It was via Zoom. And you heard about him testifying about how he wants his mother to come home. And so just always tough situations all around.
Yeah, it is. This one is. All right, stand by. We'll take a break. Coming up, we're going to head to Boston for our newest live trial, the Irish firefighter rape trial against Terrence Crosby. Stay with us. We'll bring you that up next.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a parent's worst nightmare. A 5-year-old girl left unrecognizable after she was brutally beaten by other children. We'll dive deeper into this tragic case.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on CourtTV.
Donna Edelson wasn't a regular mother.
She's the matriarch mastermind.
She's just being a parent, not a killer.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. Season finale, Saturday night at 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on CourtTV.
And welcome back to Court TV Live. We are going to turn now to Boston, Massachusetts, where an Irish firefighter is standing trial for a second time. This is on charges that he raped a woman in a hotel room.
That's right. 38-year-old Terrence Crosby was visiting Boston with fellow firefighters to walk in the St. Patrick's Day parade when the alleged rape occurred in March of last year.
At Crosby's first trial, the victim, who has decided to remain nameless, testified that she had consensual sex with another firefighter named Liam O'Brien, who was rooming with Crosby. She says they fell asleep in separate beds, but later awoke to Crosby raping her.
Before we get you into court, here is Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson with more on the background of this case.
March 14th, 2024. A night of Boston bar hopping ahead of St. Patrick's Day holiday ends with allegations of rape against a visiting Irish firefighter. 38-year-old Terrence Crosby was visiting from Dublin and came to the U.S. to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade with other members of his fire brigade. He and his friend, Liam O'Brien, were sharing a hotel room when O'Brien met a woman at the Black Rose pub. According to court documents, O'Brien went back to the hotel and had consensual sex before falling asleep in separate beds. The 28-year-old woman says that she was awakened at around 2 a.m. by Crosby, who was having sex with her. She managed to get out of the hotel room and went to the Massachusetts General Hospital to get a rape kit performed and report the alleged sexual assault. Crosby was arrested the next day at Logan Airport, where he was preparing to board a flight after moving up his travel plans.
St. Patrick's Day weekend, the consulate wasn't open. He couldn't get advice from, attorneys from back home, short of going home.
Terrence Crosby pleaded not guilty, and his first trial ended with a hung jury.
Mr. Crosby is adamant that he's done nothing wrong, that he's an innocent person.
If convicted, he could be sentenced up to 20 years in prison.
Let's get you inside of that courtroom now. Everyone has gathered in the courtroom along with the jury.
Members of the jury, hearken to indictment number 2024-00244, offense 001, rape. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Suffolk SS, at the Superior Court Department of the Trial Court for Criminal Business, begun and holden at the City of Boston within and for the County of Suffolk. On the first Monday of May in the year of our Lord 2024, the jurors for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on their oath present that Terrence Crosby on March 15, 2024 did assault CC with intent to commit rape and did commit rape upon the said CC. To this indictment, the defendant at the bar pleads not guilty and for trial places himself upon the country which country you are. You are sworn to try these issues. If he is guilty, you will say so. If he is not guilty, you will say no more. Members of the jury, hearken to the evidence. Mr. Crosby, you may be seated.
Thank you, Clerk Santano. Jurors, I'm going to take a few minutes now to explain some of the aspects of the trial so that you know what to expect as we go through it. The first thing I wanted to let you know, for the initials were used there, CC. So when there's an alleged sexual assault victim, our law protects that person's name. So sometimes initials will be used. You will hear the name used, but there are various times where we'll use initials where the lawyers will not really refer to the person by the full name. So that's the reason, is that we try to protect, we're required to protect by statute, wherever possible, the name of an alleged sexual assault victim. Remember that the indictment is not evidence. The fact that Mr. Crosby is charged with the crime, as was just read to you, and that he's here as a defendant, as I explained in more detail during your jury selection, that's not evidence against him. The court staff, Clerk Santano, our three court officers today, Officer Zardes, Officer De Benedetto, and Officer De Los Santos, they will be doing everything they can to make sure that your stay is comfortable. It is an older building, so there's some issues that we have, but to the extent possible, we'll try to make you comfortable during your jury service. Remember those rules that apply throughout. In this criminal case, like all criminal cases, the defendant is presumed innocent. He does not have to produce evidence and testify, and the Commonwealth has the burden to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. You know the rules that apply to you about not doing any independent research, not talking to anybody about the case, no social media posts, keep an open mind. I'm going to add one to that, which is you know that this is a public courtroom. So the participants in the trial, you may well see them, you're likely to see them in the hallways or near the elevator or outside the building. I've given them strict instructions to participants in this trial not to have any interaction with you. So if a lawyer waits to get on the next elevator or doesn't reach out to say hello, the reason is because they're following my order. So please understand that. So the order of events, in a few minutes, the Commonwealth has the burden of proof, as you know. So we're going to hear from the Commonwealth's lawyer for an opening statement, and then the defense has an opportunity to make an opening statement at that time. But the evidence starts with the Commonwealth calling witnesses because they have the burden of proof. Remember, the defendant doesn't have to produce anything. So for several days, you're going to be having the Commonwealth's lawyers call witnesses that you'll hear from. The Commonwealth's lawyer will question the witness. The defense counsel will have an opportunity to ask questions and cross-examination if they wish. At the end of the case, as we approach next week, we'll be getting close to the end of the case, which is after the Commonwealth finishes its evidence, the defense has a chance to put on evidence if they wish. They're under no obligation to do so. And when you've heard all the evidence, near the end of the case is when you hear the closing arguments from each side, and I'll give you the jury instructions. The final instructions will explain to you more about the burden of proof, what the Commonwealth has to prove in order to prove the defendant guilty of the charge. And then you will deliberate. Your deliberations are secret. They're in your jury deliberation room, and then your verdict will be announced in open court. So there will be media coverage of this case. I want you to know that the media coverage, the law permits it in Massachusetts, and we have rules on it, and I've issued an order on it. So media coverage is permitted, and you can't follow any media accounts, so don't make any effort to find any. And if you inadvertently are exposed to something, turn your attention away as promptly as you can. And if there's something you do happen to hear, you can let me know in the morning when I ask you that question. But if you're careful about it, I'm quite confident you'll be able to avoid the media coverage. Now, I think you'll be interested to know one of our rules as part of our order and part of the order I issued, the media cannot film the jury. Okay, so they can't film the jury up close, and they can't film any face of a jury member. Okay, so your facial image will not be part of any media exposure. And we work with the professional camera people who are used to being here following these orders. So I'm confident that they'll be able to effectuate that they don't show you in your face in any way or any sort of close-up of you. It's important that you know the role of the parties. As the judge, I make sure the case is tried fairly, efficiently, and according to the law. Don't interpret anything I say or do as a sign that I have an opinion about the evidence or the case or the participants. The lawyers, they will be, you've heard the Commonwealth will be calling witnesses. Both sides will question the witnesses. They also have the opportunity to make objections. You probably see objections play out on TV or movies. If one lawyer asks a question and the other lawyer thinks the question might be improper or might call for information that should not be admitted as evidence, that lawyer makes an objection. I have to rule on the objection. If I say overruled, that means that the witness will be allowed to answer the question. If I say sustained, that means I agree with the objection and the witness should not answer the question. I also want you to know that what the lawyers say is not evidence. So when they speak to you in the opening statement or the closing arguments, that's not evidence. They have an opportunity to speak to you, but it's not evidence. The evidence is what comes from the witness stand, from the witnesses, the answers that they give, and any exhibits that are admitted. And so that's an important thing for you to understand. The only time what a lawyer says becomes evidence is if they ask a question that contains information and the witness agrees with it or adopts it. All right, so simple thing, if say in a different type of case, if the lawyer asks a witness, was the light green, and the witness said yes, then there's evidence that the light was green. If the witness didn't answer the question, there's no evidence that the light was green. All right, now you as the jurors have by far the most important function because you determine the facts and you decide the case by reaching your verdict. In determining the facts, you are the ones who listen to the testimony and look at the exhibits and decide who and what to believe. It is up to you to make your own conclusions about what evidence to believe and what evidence is important. Use your common sense and life experience as you go through the trial. As you assess the evidence, you decide what you believe, you decide what weight to give it, and then as you go through your deliberations. So we selected 15 people who we are confident will be fair and impartial in deciding this case. You must be objective and decide the case without sympathy, prejudice, or bias. Judges and jurors must make decisions fairly and equally. We cannot treat people differently because of race, national origin, ethnicity, age, gender, sexual preference, education, income level, or any other personal characteristic. It can be difficult to be fair because we all have thoughts and opinions and preconceived notions. Jurors have to look at the case, the evidence, and the witnesses without prejudice or stereotypes. The best way to do that is to keep an open mind, listen closely to all the witnesses, consider the witnesses as individuals rather than members of a particular group. We're going to turn in a moment to the opening statements. But before that, I do want you to know that once the opening statements are finished, the court officers will distribute a notebook. So you'll each have a notebook where you can take notes. It's up to you whether you take notes. You don't have to take any. The only caution I will give you, if you do take notes, don't try to take down everything. First of all, it's impossible to do. And second, your head would be down and you'd probably miss things, observations that you would like to make. And they are electronically recording everything in the courtroom. That's under the supervision of our court recorder, Betty LaRue, who's right here in front of me. All right, let's turn to the opening statements. I remind you that they're not evidence, but it's the lawyer's opportunity to tell you what they expect the evidence to be. For the Commonwealth, please.
All right, Kelly, we just saw those instructions to the jury before openings. Very typical instructions, yes. The nuts and bolts of the trial, so to speak. Avoid media coverage. The opening statements are not evidence. Kind of standard.
Standard. And I also liked how the judge pointed out about we have very talented people, professional people that are going to be shooting this trial. We allow cameras in. And I know when CourtTV has gone and shot a lot of the trials, they do know how to shoot them, yes, to make sure we're not showing the jurors. And yes, he wanted to emphasize that to the jurors. You're not going to be shown. Yes. You can't show them.
Absolutely. And he did address that, which I agree with you was great. And the jury is now ready to go. So we're going to take a break, but we have a quick programming note first. Bianca Ellis's defense team will join Julie Grant live tomorrow morning on opening statements. They will discuss that their client was found guilty of killing 3-year-old Julian Wood in that Ohio parking lot and what is next for their client. It is an interview that you do not want to miss. Right here on CourtTV tomorrow morning starting at 8 a.m. Eastern Time.
And after the break, we'll bring you opening statements. In this case, we're watching out of Boston, the Irish firefighter rape trial. This is for Terrence Crosby. Stay tuned.
Back now to Boston and the Irish firefighter rape trial of Terrence Crosby.
The 38-year-old was visiting Boston with fellow firefighters to walk in the St. Patty's Day parade. This was last year, and prosecutors say at that time he raped a woman at a hotel room. His first trial, though, ended in a mistrial.
And we want to get you back into court now where the prosecution is about to deliver their opening statement in Crosby's second trial. Now, we have muted audio of the accuser's name because we're not allowed to play that. We need to keep that private. Let's go back in.
Every act of violence begins with an opportunity and a decision to take it. Terrence Crosby, a firefighter, had traveled to Boston from Ireland, along with other members of the Dublin Fire Brigade in March of 2024. They had all come to Boston. For the purpose of marching in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Typically, when we travel, we take an escape from our responsibilities in the stress of our everyday life. But instead, for Terrence Crosby, he used his trip as a way to be anonymous, far from home, and to commit a rape he thought he could get away with. Now, this group of firefighters from the Dublin Fire Brigade landed in Boston in the late afternoon of March 14th of 2024, and they quickly began their festivities. The group ended up at a bar called the Black Rose, which is right near Faneuil Hall. It was a festive night, and St. Patrick's Day was coming up that weekend, and the restaurant was full of people that were eating, drinking, and dancing. You will see video from the Black Rose of the defendant and members of the Dublin Fire Brigade drinking and celebrating too. You will also see that the defendant met a woman there. He dances with her, and you will see them kissing. Terrence Crosby walked out of the Black Rose with this woman, but soon after walked back into the Black Rose alone. Terrence Crosby spent the night looking for an opportunity. And when one woman walked away, he found another woman who couldn't. He found was a 28-year-old attorney living in the North End and working for a nonprofit called the Greater Boston Legal Services. On March 14th, Ms. had gone to court for work, and then she attended a work event with colleagues who included her good friend, Daniel Jacobson. Later that same night, Mr. Jacobson and another colleague decided to go to the Black Rose for dinner and drinks. While at the Black Rose, they met a man named Liam O'Brien, and they hit it off. Liam O'Brien was also a firefighter from Ireland and was here for the Dublin Fire Brigade to march in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Throughout the night, they talked and danced, and eventually they left the Black Rose together to go to the Omni Parker House Hotel, which was the hotel where Liam O'Brien was staying. They walked to the Omni Parker House together around 11:40 p.m., and they had consensual sex in Mr. O'Brien's hotel room before eventually falling asleep. There were 2 beds in that room, and because Liam O'Brien was spread out across the bed, loudly snoring, he went to sleep in the other empty bed. And that's when it happened. Close to 2 in the morning, he woke up and realized there was a stranger on top of her, naked, violating her body and raping her. Like Liam O'Brien, this man had an Irish accent, but he wasn't bald like Liam O'Brien, and he had a different physique from Liam O'Brien. This man insulted Mr. O'Brien and insisted that he wanted this. Even as she told him to stop and physically struggled to get away from him. As Liam O'Brien slept soundly in the next bed, snoring audibly, was raped by a stranger. I didn't know it at the time, but that man was Terrence Crosby. Now, the defendant ignored her pleas to stop and continued raping her, repeatedly thrusting himself inside her body. Ms. panicked and was focused on escaping, trying her best to stay safe from a stranger who she knew was willing to hurt her. Miss was eventually able to get out from under him, and she gathered her clothes and tried to leave. But the defendant wouldn't give up. He cornered her against the wall, touching her and telling her again that she wanted this. This all happened as Liam O'Brien slept, snoring after a night of drinking and oblivious to what was happening. Was able to lock herself inside of the bathroom and get away from Terrence Crosby, who had just raped her. As she left the Omni Parker house at approximately 2:20 in the morning, she texted her friend and colleague, Daniel Jacobson, who she had been with at the Black Rose, and she told him what happened to her. By 3 in the morning, was at the emergency department at Mass General Hospital, where a doctor and a nurse performed an evidence collection kit on her, taking swabs from inside and outside of her body to search for potential evidence.
Listening to the opening statements there from the prosecutors, let's go ahead and bring in our guest, still with us, trial attorney Gabriel Sepulveda-Sanchez. Okay, so this is this new trial that we're following out of Boston, and it's quite an interesting one. Mistrial the first time, prosecutors are trying it again. What's your initial take on just as we start to listen to the openings here?
Well, one thing I've always been taught by some of my mentors in trial, what you have to be careful is everything that you say in that opening statement, although it's not evidence, you better back that up with some solid evidence. So I think one of the strongest statements she made that was kind of, I didn't see coming, was that she's making the defendant look like he came all the way from Ireland with this plan to commit rape and sought out being anonymous. So if you're a good defense attorney, you have in your closing or whatever this case, when you have to point out all the things that the prosecutions failed to prove, and that's a strong statement to make this person seem like he's had a plan the minute he left Ireland to come out here. So she has to be able to back that up. So everything you say in your opening statement, although it's not evidence, that a good defense attorney is going to point out, listen, she promised you this in her opening statement. She's failed to even give you any evidence of that. So she made some anything you say in your opening statement, you have to, it's really, the jurors are assessing your credibility as a lawyer too. So you have to make sure you have proper evidence to back up those statements. So if she made that was interesting because I didn't see, I don't know what evidence they have to support that. So I'm curious to see what she does. But opening statement did kind of clarify some of the things. I was wondering too, why, okay, if this rape was happening, where was the friend at in there? And see, how drunk was he, where he's snoring and you didn't hear any struggle? So that's interesting too. So these are the things the defense lawyer is going to point out. And it's not surprising that they had a mistrial in the last thing. It just, there's some things here. There's a lot of alcohol involved. On St. Patty's Day, people are drinking heavily. So there's a lot of things that defense lawyers good positions they can make in this case.
You know, it's interesting you raise that point because I have never been a defense attorney. I do not know that I have that in my nature, but I wrote down that exact same quote from the opening statement because I thought, how in the world are you going to prove that he spent the night looking for an opportunity? I don't know. I agree completely. Let's see what happens. We need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get more of the prosecution's opening statement. Stay tuned.
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions. How do you explain it? The worst crime anyone can imagine. Do you feel like you took the fall for this murder? Tell me in your own words, what happened? Let's get started.
Interview with a Killer. New season premieres Saturday, October 25th. Only on CourtTV.
Let's get you back to the Irish firefighter rape trial that's taking place in Boston, where Terrence Crosby is standing trial for a second time on charges that he raped a woman in a Boston hotel.
The firefighter from Dublin, Ireland, was in Boston to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade when the alleged attack took place. His first trial ended in a mistrial when the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict.
You'll notice that you're going to hear some audio drops. So what we're doing here, we are muting the audio to protect the accuser's name. So when you hear that, just be aware that's what we're doing. So let's get you back inside the courtroom for the rest of the prosecution's opening statement.
At the hospital that morning, also met with detectives from the Boston Police Department Sexual Assault Unit. The lead detective, Joe McDonough, as well as other detectives from the Sexual Assault Unit, began investigating in an effort to identify the person who had done this. Detectives began their investigation by retracing steps. After interviewing, detectives went to work gathering video and room records from the Omni Parker house, video from the Black Rose, and the street cameras in between. They quickly narrowed down which hotel room had been in. It was room 610. They learned that there were 2 guests registered to that hotel room. Not just Liam O'Brien, but his fellow firefighter, Terrence Crosby. Video from the Black Rose street cameras in the Omni Parker house showed that on the night of March 14th, Terrence Crosby returned to the Omni Parker Hotel, room 610. Just before Liam O'Brien and the defendant left the room just before they got there. And he went and sat in a chair down the hall for the next 2 hours. But then he was done waiting. The defendant, the firefighter, the person who was supposed to protect people from harm, he became the danger. He walked back down the hall towards room 610, and he used his key card to get into that room, with Liam O'Brien sleeping inside. When he entered that hotel room, he saw that was asleep and that she was vulnerable and defenseless in the bed that was supposed to be his. In that hotel room, opportunity met intent. And in that moment, became his target. Terrence Crosby saw an opportunity, and he took full, violent advantage of it. No one else went into or came out of that room for the next 20 minutes until did. Video shows her walking towards the 6th floor elevators, having just been raped by Terrence Crosby. And within 3 minutes of leaving that room, texted her friend to tell him that she had just been raped, and she made her way to the emergency room at Mass General Hospital. And members of the jury, you will hear directly from that she had been drinking the night before the rape happened. And you will hear that she voluntarily gave a sample of her blood at the hospital for testing. When that blood was tested later by a toxicologist, it showed that her blood alcohol level was a 0.135 at the time it was drawn at the hospital. And ladies and gentlemen, you will hear evidence that blood alcohol content can affect people very differently based on a variety of different factors. But you yourselves will see and hear exactly how presented that night. You will see video of from the Black Rose, video of her walking from the Black Rose to the Omni Parker house with Liam O'Brien, video of her walking into the hotel and into the hotel room, and eventually, video of her leaving the hotel. 2 medical professionals, a doctor and a nurse, who evaluated and treated will tell you about their interactions with her immediately after she arrived at Mass General Hospital. Despite having drank alcohol earlier in the night, was determined to be clinically sober. She was coherent, and medical staff noted no signs of any impairment or intoxication. You will see records of her medical treatment and hear the first-hand accounts of the medical professionals who interacted with her for an extended period of time over the hours it took to complete the evidence collection kit. Swabs were taken from Ms. body in the hospital as part of that evidence collection kit. DNA testing was later done on swabs from her genital area. 2 distinct male DNA profiles were found in one of those genital swabs. And while there was an insufficient amount of male DNA to compare it to a known person, there was enough to show that the DNA was left behind by 2 different males. Now, Detective Joe McDonough spoke with Terrence Crosby at the Omni Parker house on March 16th. It was Saturday, the day before the St. Patrick's Day parade. The detective told him they were investigating to determine the next day, and that his flight home to Dublin wasn't until Tuesday, March 19th. But after being questioned by the police, what did the defendant do? He tried to skip town. He booked a new flight, one that left that very same night. He left his fellow firefighters behind, and he tried to escape the consequences of what he had done. But Boston police learned of his change in travel plans, and they had the plane turned around as it was taxiing on the tarmac about to take off. Terrence Crosby was removed from that flight, and he was turned over to the Boston police. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Now, members of the jury, the burden is on the Commonwealth to prove each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That means this burden rests solely on the Commonwealth. And we welcome this burden. We will present evidence to you that will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is the man who raped her. Through her testimony and all of the evidence that corroborates it, we will prove to you that the defendant went into that room, raped as she slept, and continued to do so after she woke up and struggled to get him off of her. The defendant thought being far from home meant no one would ever know what he did. But by the end of this trial, you will. After you have heard all of the evidence, you will know that the only verdict that is supported by the evidence is that the defendant, Terrence Crosby, is guilty.
Still with us, trial attorney Gabriel Sepulveda-Sanchez. Let me ask you this. When she said he tried to skip town, because he did talk with the detectives and then he got an earlier flight to return to Ireland, do you think that's necessarily he tried to skip town, or is it he didn't want to be in trouble? Does it look as bad as it sounds, is what I'm asking you?
You can have two. It just depends on how you want to look at it. I mean, I don't think so. I think if you're accused of a crime, you're like, okay, they interviewed you. You might just want to just get out of town. Like, because there's that risk of he's in the situation right now where he may be innocent and go to prison for 20 years. So there could be, there could be a distrust in the system, and he was probably just trying to avoid all this, not necessarily trying to take accountability for what he did. It's how you look at that situation. I think, if I were a defense lawyer, I'd argue like, yeah, he just wanted to get out of town. Like, he didn't want to deal with any of this stuff because there's that risk of being wrongfully accused by someone. So it doesn't necessarily indicate guilt. It's really how you want to see that situation. But I don't think it's unreasonable for a defense lawyer to argue that that he just wanted to leave town, and doesn't mean that he did the crime at all.
Yeah, we'll have to see how defense counsel addresses that. Gabriel, thank you so much. Gabriel Sepulveda-Sanchez, appreciate you being with us. And coming up, we're going to hear the defense's opening statement in the Irish firefighter rape trial for Terrence Crosby. Stay tuned for that.